Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Anderson, and welcome to The Road Not Taken, how ordinary people got out of their own way, and you can too. I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Sue Hitzmann, who's the creator of the MELT method, a simple self-treatment technique that helps people get out and stay out of chronic pain. She's the author of the New York Times bestseller, The MELT Method, a breakthrough self-treatment system to eliminate chronic pain, erase the signs of aging, and feel fantastic in just 10 minutes a day, which has helped over 200,000 people lead a healthy, pain-free life. She's appeared on the Dr. Oz Show, Nightline, Good Morning America, The Rachel Ray Show, and Live with Regis and Kelly. And the internationally translated MELT Method book has been featured in magazines such as Self, More, and Prevention. Sue, so glad you could join us today.
Thank you.
This is fantastic. So, my kickoff question is always based around sort of getting out of your own way, and that's sort of the focus for our conversation, but I'm sure it will lead into other things as well that are helpful for people listening. But first off, what's helped you most if you had to pick one thing in terms of getting out of your own way or handling adversity?
I think it's really cultivating contentment and being content with where I am. I'm perhaps considered a bit of an overachiever. I'm always, once I reach a goal, I just set a higher goal. And I think the thing that I've learned is to really engage in my own self-love and my own self-care. And I think as I started doing that from where my history was to where I am today, spending the last 25 years of my life really engaged in focusing on that, it's just always a practice of practicing contentment.
So is that something you start the day with?
Yes, I do. I melt my feet in the morning to ground myself, and then I do my meditation, and most often my mantra is, so be it. It is, yes, it is. It's just whatever will be, will be. What is, and so be it.
I want to hear your story in terms of, what got you to create the MELT method. So I know you were having significant pain, but can you tell that story, sort of how it all transpired?
Well, yeah, I was in the fitness industry since I'm 16 teaching aerobics. I have a master's in physiology and anatomy in my early 20s. And I think like most 20-year-olds, you think you're brilliant and you've got it all down. And I was lucky enough to be able to work with professional athletes and up-and-coming athletes. So, I was like really living the dream. I had an international best-selling boot camp video. Like I had really made it. I was up at the top of my field. And in my late 20s, I got myself into a boatload of chronic pain, and it really veered me out of the practice that I had been engaged in for, at that point, a good decade of my life, really believing, and I had formed that belief that eating right and exercising was going to lead to a healthy, fruitful, happy, joyous life. And I went down this rabbit hole to try to discover what caused my pain to become so chronic. And I uncovered an emerging field of fascial research in the late 90s. Google came up online and I typed in fascia and began to realize that I wasn't alone. There were a lot of other people who had the same philosophy as I did, and I sought them out and became a founding member of the Fascial Research Society. And the MELT method spawned out of my private practice in the late 90s, just a couple of years after I got myself out of chronic pain and started to share what I had discovered with my clients. And a client said to me, if you could just invent a way for me to do to myself with what you do with your magic hands, I'd stay out of your office. And that sent me down on this journey to develop MELT and to empower people to take charge of their aging process and to improve their health span so that they have a more fruitful lifespan.
There's an awful lot you just covered there. So first off, the chronic pain, was that, what exactly was that? Was that in joints?
No, it was actually, I woke up and the bottom of my foot hurt me, and it was kind of out of nowhere. I was an athlete, so I had sustained plenty of injuries, sprained ankles, damaged my knee, all these sort of things. And this one I woke up with, like it just entirely came out of nowhere. It wasn't like anything I had experienced. And what started out as what I would say today is plantar fasciitis, really very quickly accelerated into a body-wide pain problem. My leg hurt me, my jaw hurt me. I was exhausted all the time. I couldn't think right. I had cloudy brain. It was really, I think I got depressed because of it, because I really think I witnessed my whole life suddenly, being taken away from me. And I think that really shook me quite a bit and is what veered me out of fitness and into the healing arts of manual therapy.
Mm-hmm. And then, so was it a slow journey to get back from, you said you felt like my whole life had been taken away from me. Was it a slow journey to get back? And if it was, well, regardless of whether it was or it wasn't, how did you start to get back on track? In other words,
Yeah, it took me almost, by the time I actually found something, it was almost 18 months before I really started feeling better. And then after about 2 years, I think I was really fully where I should have been. And I think what I realized was, you can form a belief about something, and you can create what I call thought viruses. Where you can all but convince yourself that something either is going to happen or can never happen. And my belief when I was younger, where this all kind of spawned was when I was 11, my great-grandmother, who was super spry, died. And just before she died, when I went back to see her that last year of her life, she didn't remember who I was. She couldn't walk. She only spoke Italian. And that really shook me. And I said to my aunt, what happened to great-grandma? And she said, she just got old. And I thought, well, am I going to get old? She said, yeah. I said, well, how do you stop that from happening? And that was, I guess I witnessed her unable to move about as she wanted and how sad she was. And when that happened to me, I thought, my gosh, this is it. I'm already aging. And at 26 years old, I thought I had really gone down this horrible road that I could never come back from. And maybe I was dying, And then, of course, you go down the rabbit hole of the doctor's offices and they're like, maybe it's lupus, maybe it's MS, maybe it's chronic fatigue, it's fibromyalgia, and now they're just trying to diagnose you with whatever they can come up with. And it was, it really stopped me in my tracks and made me step out of my comfort zone of what I knew. And I think it was very humbling because I realized just how much more there is to learn about the human body, the psychology of it, the embodiment of healing, and so I've been on this 25 plus year, almost 30-year journey of discovery. And every day I discover more things. And, it's just, I think as you get older, you respect how very little you know and that there's always something new to learn.
It's funny. And it would be way too arrogant of me to say that, well, I feel like I'm on a similar journey, only kind of with the head in terms of versus some of the physical piece. I know there's also a massive overlap. Was there a day, though, when you kind of drew the line? You said you were at this sort of downward spiral. I mean, it must have been extremely distressing to go to different doctors where they're trying to find some label to give you. Did you hit a defining day, or what was it that got you to seek access to new information? In other words, was it the pain and the frustration, or was it somebody else? Was it chance? What was it?
I think it was kind of chance. I think sometimes divine intervention puts itself to you. And I was at a friend's house and they had a dog, and I bent over to pet the dog, and the dog jumped up and whacked me on my nose. And I couldn't feel my front teeth. My face was all swollen. And one of my friends said, for God's sake, Sue, I told you to go see Barbara Chang. She was a craniosacral therapist. And they said, I've been telling you to go to see her for years because you're in this. Like, you don't even know it, but you could do what she does and you're not seeing it and you need to go. I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I went to see her, and that really, it was true. I had a somato-emotional release when I was with her. And I realized that the energy body and the field that we have, the own frequencies of our own body, can kind of get derailed from the way that life occurs, and it can also right the wheel. Sometimes it shifts you back into the roadway that you need to go and gets you off the side streets and back on the highway. So I think it was maybe a little divine intervention on that one.
Was it work that happened with Barbara, though, that she was doing? Was it sort of some, forgive me, I've heard, is it craniosacral therapy? Is that what it's called?
Craniosacral, yeah. So she worked on my nose, and as she was working on my nose, I had what's called a somato-emotional release. I had a historical memory of my dad when I had broken my nose in high school as a softball player. In an instant, that entire emotional recall came back up into my mind, and my dad sticking his cigarette in his mouth and reaching down to my face and pushing my nose back into place and going, don't worry, it'll build character, walked away. And I told her that, and she goes, oh, that's a somato-emotional release. And I didn't really understand at the time what that was, but what I can say today is that our bodies retain information for our mind so that we can cope, so that we can adapt and continue on, and I almost think it's like post-traumatic stress disorder, and how an instant can happen and it can send you back into that memory that you had in the past and you don't even know it's happening. And so that was a real shock for me. It was like, what was that? And then I just wanted to know what it was, and I started taking courses to understand more and to find out the answers of what fascia is and what the energy fields are and what is frequency, and how can you heal a body beyond tissue, beyond just the brain. What more is there? Is there something else? And to me, I just think that it's a unified concept of healing is out there for us. It's just it's so non-traditional because we're always so convinced that we need a doctor. And I always say, if you want to take a medicine or you want to get a surgery, go see a doctor. If you want to create true healing and really get into your body to get yourself out of pain, don't go see a doctor, because that's not what they do.
So this is awesome, because I thought I might be somehow going to upset you if I brought up anything outside of the physical in this conversation, but you've already started doing that. So how do you incorporate the energy fields piece to what appears on, again, superficially on the videos that I've seen are, physical things? And I mean, I can't wait to try to work on them because I need to.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's start with that. But how do you incorporate that work?
Well, I mean, we like to call our body separate, the mind-body connection, right? But I'm like, actually, the reason that happened is like, you could go all the way back to earlier than Descartes, and in these ancient times, they wanted to do dissections, and so they had to convince the church that that the soul and the spirit was part of the mind that left with the body, and the body was just a shell. And so, what do we care about the body, right? That's how they got to do dissection. So that's where that whole mind-body separation actually originated. But what we don't realize, or perhaps what's not talked about enough, is that your brain and the brain matter is only one component of your nervous system. You have this brilliant peripheral nervous system, and housed under the periphery is this autonomic nervous system, which 98% of what happens to us in a day that keeps us alive is autonomic. So if you use, like for the melt method, you're trying to quiet the stress reflex. You're trying to bring the stress regulators down and try to bring the repair regulators back up. So altering vagal tone, stimulating your hands and feet, or compressing the tissues along your spine will create biofeedback, sensory responsiveness from body to brain, and create new messages back to the brain so that the brain is now processing something different than it normally does. And that's what melt is really all about, is kind of getting you off of the side streets and again back on the highway of sensing, feeling, and giving your nervous system something new to adapt to through self-care.
Okay, this is funny because I didn't know that. I thought it was more around just loosening up muscle and being more
everybody
flexible.
Sure, they
like
see the roller, they think it's foam rolling, and I say, we don't really roll very much. And actually, in melt, the roller is really soft.
Yeah.
Most rollers are really hard. This actually is made of a rubber-based material. And my philosophy is that, why is it that when it comes to self-care, like even it doesn't matter if it's exercise or foam rolling, it always seems like everybody's just trying to beat something out of their bodies. They've got to iron themselves like a shirt, and if they're not feeling something, it's not working. If I'm on a treadmill and somebody's next to me, I've got to compete with that person, even if it's only in my mind. I'm competing with something. And to me, I think that there's just a gentler approach to self-care and embodiment that is so profound, and actually a very light touch can ease and adapt a body far faster than a heavy forced compression. Even if you ever feel sad, it takes a hug to make you cry and to allow energy to release from the body. It doesn't need, you don't need to shake somebody to make them change. Sometimes just a hug or a gentle touch can do it. And I think that's our message is, instead of overstimulating the body, why not try to down-regulate it? Why not ease pressure into the body, sense and become more aware? And that's really what the MELT method is all about, is about building self-awareness outside of what you feel is pain, to become aware of what's going on in your body so that you can kind of take your mind away from the pain response and alter the brain's process of producing the pain sensation.
Well, it sounds easier than meditating in terms of the self-awareness piece. And I'm not trying to be funny in a way, because I'm a big believer in meditation, but it's there are days when it's really hard. I feel like you're getting anywhere.
Certainly.
When you say it's so profound, and you gave a great example around the hug, except that obviously you've got tools that are part of your process. Can you give an example or two of perhaps other people that have used the method and how it's been profound for them?
Oh my gosh. I mean, to me, when you have pain, like, I think what everybody has to realize is that 100% of the time, if you're sensing pain, your brain is what's producing that sense of pain. And when it's doing that, pain is really just a way to alert you that something's not right. Your brain is trying to give you a message, hey, something's wrong. But when pain becomes chronic, I always say you have an issue in your connective tissue. It's not just in your mind, that in fact, our sensory nervous system, in your connective tissue, there are billions of sensory nerve endings. And so, like as an example of a client, I had a client who had chronic fatigue, chronic TMJ, and migraines. I mean, she just had the triple threat. And she had gone to see acupuncturists and rolfers and psychologists, and she had tried medication. And it just seemed like nothing was really homing in on what was wrong. That's what she said to me. She was like, I just feel like I'm constantly missing something, like something derailed me. And I talked her through the methodology. I asked her to go into her body, use body sense what she feels. And in the moment where she said, I'm not sure I feel anything. And I said, there it is, right? You're so out of your body. You can't even sense yourself. Let's take some time and really find you. And through imagery and through gentle touch, you just saw her entire body start to shift. And she said to me, I felt like my energy elevated out of me and then dropped into my back. And I said, well, now that you're there, let me ask you the question. I want you to sense what we define as the masses and spaces in your body. Can you feel now that there are parts of your body on and off the floor? And she says, my gosh, I feel it now. I understand what you're saying. And through a course of a number of weeks with her, she went from having chronic migraines every day to having them once a week, to having them once every 10 days, to having them once every 20 days. And then now she's able to just manage it on her own. And she realizes how much of her life was causing the problems that she sensed. And so to me, I think it's an awareness issue that most of us feel like we so know ourselves. We're so confident we've got ourselves down. But really, I think oftentimes we don't know who we are. We don't know what we feel. And our feelings are predicated on history and not about the present moment. We're actually not living very presently at all.
So the tools that you have are a way for us to tune in more to our body. And are you then saying it creates this domino effect that helps us become more self-aware about what might be bothering us? Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, is that before we have pain, if you could sense imbalances or a lack of continuity in your body, and if you can restore that and bring your body back to a better baseline that feels stable to you, that enhances your nervous system in what I call the autopilot, the autonomic parts of our nervous system that keep us balanced and stable. It helps it to reset to a new baseline. So to me, the thing is, when somebody feels like they need to change themselves, it's because there's something wrong. I'm too fat. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. My job isn't good enough. So we're always looking for change. And I'm saying, how about we don't change anything and we just get present? We just get down deep in where we are right now and then work our way out of that. And that to me is a more profound way to adapt your body to something else. And I always say, like, the real and lasting change to be what and who we are begins by removing what obstructs us so that we can be who we are and hold nothing back. And we don't need to keep anybody else happy. We don't need to worry about the things outside of ourselves, that we can go into our bodies, and much like a flowing water that's unobstructed, we can begin to cultivate our new energy and really allow it to just flow out of us. And that is what Melt is about getting into your body before you have a problem and enhancing the good things rather than always fixing what's wrong.
So what about the physical symptoms, though, that we have from stress in our life, whether it's acid reflux or irritable bowel syndrome or bad backs or migraines, as you talk about? Can you explain where your work comes into that? Well, you sort of already did, but perhaps in a different way.
Absolutely. So the autopilot, the parts of our body that support, protect, and stabilize us, there's 3 neurological regulators of stress, repair, and digestion. It's called the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric nervous systems. And the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are like a seesaw. Incoming stress comes up, the sympathetic system rises. Ideally, the stress reduces and the parasympathetic or restore mechanisms come into balance. But in today's day and age, we're always in a tip scale. We've got too much stress coming in. We're not sleeping well. We're not meditating. We're not getting quiet with ourselves. We're always on. We're worried about everything else, and checking our phones and making sure people are liking us on Instagram and all this other craziness that has no value of real life at all. I mean, when we're dead, people are going to be sad, but then the world's going to continue on without us. We just have to get over that. We're that important to have to look at Instagram every 5 minutes. But in this day and age, we're so inundated with stress that we're not getting the repair on a cellular level that we should. And so for a lot of us, our autopilot thinks that tip scale of stress is actually the balanced place. And when stress is constantly outweighing our body's ability to repair, our enteric nervous system, our gut regulators, our neurotransmitters, serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, all of these neurotransmitters and also hormones get out of balance. And now you have other symptoms like acid reflux, anxiety, depression, constipation, weight gain, a lack of energy. It's like you get the cascade of hell living in your body. And the problem with that is that every single one of those symptoms, in America at least, we just treat it with a medication. We can take a drug for every single one of those things. And I'm saying, well, what you're doing is we're very symptom-based remedies. We're never really looking at the cause of the stress and repair regulators being out of balance. So what the MELT method is really about is about boosting the repair mechanisms, because you can't really eliminate stress. I mean, when people say, you see it on magazines, abolish stress, banish stress, eliminate stress. Life is stressful. Like your kids are stressful, your husbands and wives, your job, what clothes you have in your closet, it's all stressful, right? So forget about eliminating the stress. It's more, can I repair my body from the stress that I've chosen to be my life and the environment that I live in? Can I create a better relationship with both my internal environment and the environment around me so that there's balance and harmony that I can always come back to, so that my enteric nervous system, which is again where all the neurotransmitters are being produced that are helping us downregulate, can function efficiently. And that again, that's what this methodology is really about, is getting those regulators back into balance.
Okay, so just, and you said maybe as little as 10 minutes a day, and what it's going to help us repair some of the imbalances that are going on that just inevitably happen from just living, and and this is my language now, is going to help us feel more centered. Mm-hmm. And does it then make us more, as you said, more aware, which hopefully then makes us more a bit able and proactive to deal with problems that we've got more effectively? Is that the idea?
Yes, it comes down to the word stability. Like when people think stability, I think we think about, a person who's unstable would be like walking around with a walker, but even athletes are unstable. And I mean that on every level: chemical, emotional, psychological, physiological, structural. all components of stability are functioning very much out of our conscious awareness or control. And again, what Melt is really here to do is to boost the fascial fluid flow. The fascia is the supportive infrastructure under our skin, and the fluid, the interstitial fluids in fascia, are driving itself through these pre-lymphatic channels and into the lymph system. And your lymphatic system is the most valuable system of healing and repair in our body. It's what keeps us healthy, is the health of our that component of our lymphatic system. So this is really educating people that if you have emotional distress, instead of thinking it's all up in your brain matter, that the sensory nerve endings, the periphery, can also be impacted. When fascia is cellularly dehydrated, it makes your body feel like you have to work even harder just to maintain your normal function, just to move around. And so if you stimulate the body and you give back to the tissues in the body, the brain kind of goes, I feel good. And when you feel good, you move more, you get up, and you have a more fruitful life because you're feeling good. Why don't people exercise? It's because they hurt and they're exhausted. So it's kind of an alternative to just say, it's kind of the vicious cycle even that people get themselves into, is like, oh, my back hurts, so I'm going to sit down. But by sitting down, it's going to perpetuate the back pain. And so it's a vicious cycle. And that's what people are usually stuck in, is that cycle of, I don't feel good, so I'm not going to move. And by not moving, I'm going to feel worse. And it just send you down the road of dysfunction. So this is an easy way to get out of it, by tuning in and doing something that is really very beneficial and helpful for your body. It's a nice thing to do with meditation. Like if ever you had trouble meditating, if you melted your hands and feet and then you meditated, I'll bet you $1 you'll get into that zone of staying in that zone of not thinking of anything for a longer period of time. It's easier to set into it.
And then how has it helped you beyond that initial repair piece? Because that's my sense is it does a heck of a lot more than just, I don't know, rebalance the scales in terms of stressors and perhaps rejuvenate the body so that it feels better. Where does it go next for you?
Well, for me, I just feel like I don't know what my life would be without Melt, right? To me, it's what keeps me feeling good. And the beauty of the method also is with our instructors is really watching also how they've gone out and helped so many people. And when you do this in a group environment and you really are there to contribute, I think that also has, made my life have a purpose. And so that obviously helps with my overall sense of self. Is there's self-worth there's value, because it helps me to unobstruct any energy that's kind of coming at me. Is I just know that what I'm doing is a contribution to the world. And I think that has helped me in general, be a better person, because I feel I have something to contribute.
So is it too much of a stretch to think that people listening that are feeling sort of stuck with where they are professionally or personally, that using the Melt method 10 minutes a day it certainly sounds like it's going to be, surprisingly beneficial. How might it also help, or what else do you recommend to people that, also is going to make a difference in terms of helping them get unstuck and into taking more action?
Oh, well, I think, God, there's so many things, from journaling, making sure you're talking to someone, really learning what your triggers are, finding self-worth, speaking from a positive tone, not using the you statement, like making it, being the victim and making it, well, they said, or you said this, and just changing your state and realizing that control begins by honoring the self, by honoring where you are. And so what I just really like, again, about the methodology is that you're assessing your body for a cumulative stress that could be causing you pain. If it's not right now, it could go down that road. Treat your own body, improve your own neurological stabilization, and then reassess and see if you feel better. And if you feel better, what a profound thing that is. And I think that excites people, especially because when you are not happy, when psychologically, physically, you don't feel vibrant, your world gets awfully small. And so what I think melt does is it expands that horizon and gets people to realize that wherever they are today can be changed. And if you can't change yourself easily, that is, I think, a real frustration for people. I would say frustration is just anger in a tuxedo. You know, we don't call it anger, but it's anger when we're frustrated.
Yeah, no, this makes a ton of sense to me when you talk about the importance of feeling better, but also this notion of the world getting smaller, because it's true. When we don't feel good, we tend to want to isolate, which is only bad, but that's all we feel like doing. But also just the whole notion to me has applications to every area of our life. I think is just this notion that when you feel better, and when you, I mean, I do feel like other people become part of this, but I guess it could be other ideas and resources. You just start exposing yourself, as you say, to different ideas, and then all of a sudden you start to see things differently. And so I want to kind of sort of quickly come back to your broken nose experience. Is that the point you were making? Is that craniosacral therapy experience somehow opened a world that you'd blocked? And what was the message that was negative that had happened at that time? Was that the memory of the great-grandmother? Or because I just want to make sure I understand the significance of that experience.
No, it was my dad was just a mean person to me, and always putting me down, always telling me how strange I was and how awkward I was, and I wasn't like the other kids, and I should learn to fit in, and why do I always have to stand out, and can't you just be quiet and don't talk, and nobody wants to hear from you. And those were always those messages. And when I broke my nose and my dad said, don't worry, it'll just build character, of course in high school you just get horrifically picked on. And it did build character. I mean, I guess it really made me even more alienated and quiet, and feeling outcasted and awkward. And that was a time in my life where I believed, I had formed a belief from my father that I was strange and awkward and bizarre and not normal, and I didn't fit in. And that when I went and saw, again, like jump ahead so many years, a decade goes by. And when Barbara worked on me with cranial work, she worked on my nose, right? And I woke up the next morning and my foot didn't hurt me anymore. Right. And I had told her about my foot, I went for my nose, but I told her, I've had this chronic pain in my foot. And when she worked on me, she said, I get this sense that you're like a perfect flower that's been yanked up out of the ground, and like your roots aren't in the soil. And what I can tell you today is that a year after my foot, started to really hurt me, a year after that, my dad got diagnosed with cancer. And then, after he died, that was, kind of transformational for me, where I was like sort of freed from his energy of pulling me down. And that was a very enlightening moment of how much I had developed so many beliefs because of somebody else's message to me. And when Barbara worked on my nose, and I said, what muscle were you on? And she said, I wasn't on a muscle, I was on your cranial rhythm. And I said, well, did you do something with my cranial rhythm? She goes, we just regulated it, and then you had a somato-emotional release. And I was like, so you did something to the cranial rhythm? And she said, do you know what the cranial rhythm is? And I said, yes, the fill and release phase in the spine. And she goes, do you know can you palpate that? And I said, yeah. She goes, what else can you feel? I'm like, organs have motility, and the breath and circulation. And she said, gosh, you know what, Sue? Not everybody can feel those things. Maybe you're in the wrong industry. I think maybe you should take a cranial course. You'd probably discover some things about your own skill set. And first I was like, whatever. But it was my friend who told me to go see her and saying, you have a skill like that. You just don't know it. And there it was. And so again, sometimes I think people put you in the path that you should be on, and sometimes you veer yourself right out of it, So I just always feel when it comes to self-love and self-care, if you really want to make those lasting changes, you have to learn to find what obstructs you. And sometimes we obstruct ourselves from our history. Our history obstructs us. And we are not living presently. In fact, we're always thinking about, 5 years from now or next year. We always have these things we want to do. Someday I'm gonna, but I can't because I have this past. And so we miss it. We miss that very present energy that is part of us. And I think that is why so many people struggle emotionally, feel detached, don't exceed their expectations, don't find their full potential, whatever it is. I think that it's all part of it. And I think that the mind is not just the gray matter in your head. I think that the mind body is one thing. I think that the nervous system and the fascial system are the stability systems of our body. And if you can access those types of components of our body beyond exercise, beyond muscles, if you really want to improve neurological stability, structural stability, and emotional stability, then homing in on the autonomic components of your nervous system and the fascial system, I think, are the two missing links of pain-free living and really living your true self.
So in terms of getting rid of obstacles, you said our history obstructs us. Are you saying then that if people do the melt method, it's going to help them with some of that process?
Yes.
Because, I mean, most of us are raised by, obviously everybody's flawed. So inevitably all of us are raised by flawed human beings. I assume, I shouldn't even assume this, I assume a few people grow up with unconditionally loving parents, but I'm guessing my understanding is that the vast majority of us don't. So again, I guess what my brain is a bit stuck on is this negative parent, and I guess I should raise my own hand here since I had one too. It just fascinates me that it sounds like you're able to let go of your dad after he died, which I think is interesting because I think a lot of people, it doesn't make any difference how long a parent's been dead. That's sort of the hardwired negative voice.
Yeah, but you can't. You're never gonna. That's just it. Is you can't erase the past, but you can sort of rewrite it to not be so overwhelming, and even parents that seem like they're perfect, like you have those people say, oh, my parents were so supportive, they were so loving, they said I could do anything that I wanted to if I put my mind to it. And I was like, actually, that's I think that's very neglectful also. It's an odd form of neglect, but telling kids that they can do anything that they want, and then when they're an adult and they're not getting everything that they want, and just like, why isn't the world coming to me? My parents said I should have anything I want and it's not coming. And that can send people into a complete downward spiral. So even when you have the best parents, the reality of it is we have to parent ourselves. We have to become our own parent and love ourselves unconditionally for all of the mishaps and all of the craziness that happens. And and I just think it's about being very, very present. And so a lot of us we never even consider that we're not present because, again, we form a belief that this is all hocus pocus and whatever. And then when you really look at those people who say that, they're drinking too much and they have terrible relationships and they their bodies aren't doing what they should and they're taking medication. And so even people who deny it, they're denying themselves. They're denying the present, the reality, really. I think that's it's a trick sometimes, I mean, history is just what it is, and it will always wreak its ugly head. And I just actually, in the New Melt Performance book, I think that book is going to really shake up some people, because when you look at the book, I always say, don't judge a book by its cover. I know you see this blonde-haired girl with rollers and balls and a band, but in chapter 3, I talk about stability on a soul level, stability on an emotional level, and how we do so many things to please others, how we do things and we don't even know that we're not present while we're doing it. We have no idea. So I really propose a lot of the emotional side of everything from pain to performance, and I think it's going to really shake some people up, and I think people are really going to relate to the emotional components of stability that nobody really talks about, because it's not something. It's not very measurable like pain is very subjective. I could punch you and my friend both in the arm with the exact same amount of pressure, and you might stand up and punch me back, and she might fall on the floor and tell me she's going to sue me. You know what I mean? So that's the problem, is it's all based on your history and how you, maybe if you had a moment like that in your past, we don't realize that how we're reacting right now may actually be because something very similar happened in our past, and our brain is just recalling it and we miss it. So it's just, I think psychology is a very intriguing component of well-being that people don't explore at all.
Well, it's funny because before our interview, one of the things I wanted to ask you, even though I don't know if it's entirely related to getting out of your own way, I suppose it is really, is certainly in the United States, it seems like with fitness and health, everything's has a shelf life, like the Atkins diet or whatever it is. Like, it's popular for a while, it's all the rage, everyone's trying it, South Beach diet, whatever it might be. I know I did Body for Life for 6 months. Like, things are all the rage and they're the best sellers, and then, well, it seems like anyway, you never hear from that person again. And I thought, gosh, doing what you do, I thought the hardest part, again, not living in your world whatsoever, is staying relevant, or like how do you kind of keep moving with the times in some way, shape, or form? And yet, what fascinates me talking to you is that you do sound very much like a thought leader in the health world, because you're talking about psychology for a change. I mean, I say for a change because I don't hear that hardly ever. It's always very physiological and physical is all I ever hear about. And maybe, okay, fine, now the sort of nutrition and sleep gets thrown in. But anyway, so this is what's fascinating. But I am curious, how do you kind of, I don't know, keep a focus and be thinking ahead in terms of staying relevant in a world that's typically looking for sort of a quick fix or a new idea?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, you actually said a couple of things there. I mean, first, I'm a geek. I love learning, and I am constantly searching for more information. I'm always on the cutting edge of like a discovery. The other thing is hope. To me, I think is something we underplay. And I really feel the reason that I have a great amount of success with my clients is because I can create rapport with them and meet them on a level of tone, of messaging. I say things back to them in just the right way that makes them realize that they don't know what they don't know, and I know something that they need to know. And I'm always saying to my clients, help me help you help yourself. And it is a part of belief that you can heal, and that you can transform, and that you can change. I mean, what is the saying? If you don't believe something can happen, then most likely it won't. Mm-hmm. If you believe something might happen, there's a higher chance that it will. And that, to me, I think it's an important piece of life, is to realize that we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And then we're like, how did I not know that before? And I can tell you, in the fascial community, when I had heard about connective tissue in the early 90s when I was in college, but they never made it very relevant. It wasn't an important component. It was a passive packing material that was chucked in the bucket and created passive cushioning, and that was it, right? Let's look at the good stuff. That's just like the stuff to chuck in the bucket. And as I started to realize that fascia is a system, I thought to myself, how could I have a master's in physiology and exercise science, and there's an entire system in this body that I don't know anything about? How's that impossible? And it's not in my books. It drove me crazy. So every year there's more and more research, because technology is allowing us to understand the body. And even with exploring pain and understanding how the brain works, and the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, and understanding the brain is so fascinating, what we're able to look at now, like Dr. Amen's work with the brain scanning. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's like whatever you thought you knew, you just need to realize that however smart you think you are, there's going to be something else that comes up that either challenges your beliefs, reinforces your beliefs, or completely derails you because it's so brand new that you have a hard time even believing that it's true. But those are the beauties of life, is being challenged. I mean, if something's challenging you, then there must be something to it, because if it doesn't challenge you, then it's probably not that great a thing. It's not, like, if it doesn't strike your curiosity or go, I don't know if I've ever heard that before, who cares, right? And I also think that people get into what I call, they become yeah-butters. Yeah, but I've already done that. Well, yeah, but I've done this thing. It's just like that. Oh, well, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And what they're saying is, I don't feel like doing anything else. I just like to complain about myself, and stop making me try to change myself. I'm just standing here complaining to you so that you'll listen to me, but I'm actually not looking to change anything. And there are people that are literally like that. And so I always say, do you want me to help you, or do you want to dismiss my help? You pick. I don't need to help you. It's not benefiting my life to help you. So if you don't want the help, there's my door. Go find some other person to complain to. I don't have time to listen to you. I'm not here to commiserate. I'm here to help you, to move you forward. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to move forward, then I can't help you. And, again, help me help you, help yourself. That should be a message we all hear more than once in our lifetime.
Oh, that's great stuff about being challenged. So in terms of what's next for you, what do you see?
Oh, I mean, I only just feel like I'm just at the crest of, like, the beginning. I'm like, I've just gotten up on that wave, and I'm like just still trying to stand up on that board. I believe that what I'm sharing could go around the world, and I could help anybody at any age, at any fitness level, speaking any language, with any dysfunction. I think that I could share with them some piece of what I've learned to benefit their lives. And I hope to just continue to go down this path. I think I've got at least 2 more books in me. Mm-hmm. I love teaching, I love educating, and I love learning. And so I feel like, I'm almost 50, and I feel like, I'm halfway through my life, and I'm only just starting to get going. So I think that the second half will be far superior than the first, because I just have more of an understanding of myself and what there is to know. So I don't know. I think what's up for me is just a lot more joy and exploration and frustration and anger, and I'm sure all sorts of things. But I think I'll just continue to be a contributor and a pioneer in this industry to try to bridge the gap between the general public and these brilliant researchers that are out there transforming technology and science in human healing.
And is it those other fields that help you in terms of coming up with new ideas? Because I know the typical adage that I've heard over many years anyway is that the best ideas for one industry come from a completely different industry. So we have to expose ourselves to, in other words, you going to a health conference may not be the place to get exposed to those ideas. So what do you do to, again, get exposure to different ways of thinking and different ideas?
I mean, I learn from different industries, but I read tons of books. Of course, I'm highly cultured in my industry of the healing arts, but I also, look at like Brene Brown and trying to understand how to, help my business. Or I learn about philosophy. I learn about neuroscience, biology. I love understanding, different species and how their brains function, and why is that different than humans, and why are humans, why are we like this? And I think philosophy and psychology and having a business mind and being a teacher, I just think there's so much to learn. It just is like, keep your mind open and don't be convinced that you know everything, because the second that you do, you'll limit your expectations. I think you'll limit your potential too.
That's amazing. 2 or 3 quick questions to sort of wrap things up. I don't know if you're familiar with Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, but I read it a few times last year. But basically the thesis in his book is that most people don't take a big leap in life because they're afraid that if they do and they fail, that it would be too painful of a thing to go to their deathbeds with. What do you say to that?
The only failure is not trying. That's the failure. Is when you when you think you might be able to and you don't try. I think that's failure. If you think you might be able to, I always say, not because you want to, just because you can, you should try. Right? It's like I always feel like I'm Yoda. No, can't, only do. Mm-hmm. Only do.
I love it. And then a couple more questions. So since your debilitating pain that you had when you were in your 20s, since then, who do you think you've become?
Gosh, I've become myself. I've become a more empowered Sue. I think I've become more the person that when I was a kid and I looked at other women, who were in their, I guess 40s or 50s, and I thought someday I'm going to be like that. I think I turned out to be just the right person, just the person I thought I would always become.
And for people that haven't experienced something that significant pain-wise, I don't know, are there suggestions you have for them? I mean, is that really what the MELT method's going to help in terms of helping people move forward? Because sometimes some of the people I talk to, they've had pretty extreme experiences, and so on one level, my concern is the listener that says, well, I haven't been in a car accident, I haven't been diagnosed with cancer, I didn't break my neck water skiing, how am I supposed to sort of fuel myself to make big changes? Again, what advice do you have for people like that? Because that's probably the majority of people.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, pain is a great motivator, right? When something's wrong in your body, that's when you want to try to change something. And I hear these words, I just wish I could go back and get what XYZ, right? I wish I could go back and do this a different way. And I always say that's the trick, is that you can never go back. You can only go forward. And so I always say, why wait for pain to get out of pain? Why wait for a problem to get out of the problem? I think that we need to learn what it is to truly be proactive rather than reactive. Oftentimes we're just reacting to something that is wrong, rather than really homing in on what's right and enhancing it and elevating it. And I think that, we need to realize that sometimes we're around people who aren't elevating us. And maybe at one point they drove our spirit up, but then something happens and they're not doing that anymore. And so it's hard sometimes to walk away. Sometimes it's hard to shift until things just get so bad that then we finally take the leap. But again, why wait for the worst case scenario to just sit back, really get quiet, look around, embody the present moment, and then take action. And to me, that is like there is a part of pain that hijacks those areas of our body to express itself. And the same areas we produce emotions, past memories, and future intentions are also the areas of our brain that we produce pain. So sometimes, again, I think pain is the great motivator to wake those areas of our brain up so that we take action. But again, don't wait for pain to be your motivator.
Well, thank you. And I also like the way you added the piece about who you spend time with, because I think, that's that human innate tendency. We're spending time with people just like us, but if those people aren't really moving much either, or going places that you want to, or becoming the person, if they're not becoming, you want to be, if someone wants to be, do, and have more in life, and I assume they are, otherwise I wouldn't be listening to this, that, it is crucial that we take a much, much closer look at our surrounding cast, because I think that's impacting us far more than we recognize, and we just get used to it. So, but this has been absolutely brilliant. So, and it's so funny because it's a perfect transition to say for anybody listening who wants to feed off more of your unbelievable energy, and I certainly now sit here wishing, God, I wish I was going to New York City soon. How can they keep in touch with you and sort of, again, learn more and also just sort of keep in the loop with what you're working on?
Yeah, if you go to meltmethod.com, MELT method.com, you can read my blogs. I have an app where every week I put out a new video of self-care. We have thousands of instructors worldwide that teach MELT, so you can also just experience it in a live environment. And I'm pretty active on social media. If you click and find MELT Method on Instagram and Facebook, I'm always posting, and also Sue Hitzmann Hitzmann as the fan page. If you like that fan page, I always put any research I find, any new research papers. I'm always posting something that I find and try to pass it along to other people and see what they think about it.
And if there isn't an instructor nearby, are there classes or is there stuff online that people can sort of teach themselves how to use the roller and some of those other products?
Yeah, every week, actually on the app, there's a getting started section. So it really breaks it down what the methodology really is, what are the 4 R's, how do you begin to apply the self-care in this very simple way. Like I always say stick to my plan, because if you stick to my plan, I've worked with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, tens of thousands. So, trust me, I got this stuff down. So if you follow my plan and you start the protocol as I'm asking you to do, you'll see in just weeks, you'll start to feel better and better and better. And then you'll really instill a self-care practice. And the nice thing about a lot of the melt method in general is you can do it while you're watching TV. And then just the rebalancing and the stability stuff, that's where you want to get quiet and really tune into your body. But it's a practice of discipline. I think, self-care is a discipline. And that's what I'm sharing with people is how to create a discipline out of self-care by using that app and every week trying something new. I think that's the great motivator of self-care, is always having something new to experience.
And if they go to the App Store, is it you literally type in Melt Method? Is that correct?
Melt Method. Yep, Melt Method.
Brilliant. Awesome. Okay, well, so this has been amazing. And it's funny. So this has gone way deeper than I thought it would, and I'm glad it has, because to me this is more interesting as well. But it's, I had no idea. I thought I had a sense of what you do, and I was completely wrong.
I'm so glad.
But no, this is amazing. So listeners, the show notes and some of these links will be, of course, on the website, matt-anderson.com, matt-anderson.com. Otherwise, again, it would be madness not to take some specific next steps, at least one. And I guess it makes the most sense to sort of check out what, about the melt method and, order some of those materials so that you can start working on yourself. That would be the most obvious place to start, I think, because it sounds like many of the benefits are going to come from doing that. But there have been numerous other best practices that have come up just in terms of self-care, and even sort of perhaps doing some of the work on getting some of those old obstacles out of the system. For me, there have been many in that regard today. Who you spend time with, getting new ideas in different places, some of those types of things. Otherwise, thank you again, Sue. And I'm going to wrap things up with my favorite question, which is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm Matt Anderson, and this was The Road Not Taken.